Hello, my name is Gretta Fahey from Claremorris, Ireland. There are three major neuroscientists who come online regularly telling us what they can do with the human brain. And they claim they can do almost anything. And one of them is Dr. James Giordano of Georgetown University Medical Center. One of them is Dr. Charles A. Morgan, a professor in the Department of National Security at the University of New Haven. And another one is Dr. Craig Venter of the Human Genome Project. He is an American biotechnologist and businessman, and he is associated with the State University of New York in Buffalo. They come online regularly, especially Dr. James Giordano, and they tell us they can do almost anything with the human brain. And if they can do almost anything with the human brain, what brains are they working on? They don't tell us what brains they're working on. They just tell us we can do almost anything with the human brain now. So there must be human brains. If they can do something with them, they must have human brains that they're experimenting on. And yes, because I am a non-consensual victim of human experimentation, of brain experimentation. And so are many of my friends throughout Ireland and throughout the wider world. And when we go to the police, they don't validate our statements. Instead, they mandate we go for psychiatric evaluation. And when we go for psychiatric evaluation, if we tell the truth to a psychiatrist, we are then locked inside a psychiatric hospital and mandated to ingest very, very poisonous substances, which make us unable to think clearly and make us unable to elucidate what's happening to us clearly and concisely and precisely. So if Dr. James Giordano of Georgetown University Medical Center is able to do all of these things with the human brain, and we tell the police that we are being experimented on, why don't they believe us? Why don't they act on it? Why don't they why don't they believe us? Why are they refusing to believe us? Why are they refusing to validate our statements? And if they're refusing to validate, if the police refuse to validate a statement from a member of the public, that's against constitutional law. And if a member of the police force breaks constitutional law, they are a criminal. So the police are now criminals because they're refusing to believe that we are being targeted by brain weapons. They're refusing to validate our statements. Instead, they wrongly send us for psychiatric evaluation. And the psychiatrists appear to be under brain weapon control themselves, because you can't speak to them logically, or you can't get them to listen to you and to believe you. You can tell them, I am being targeted by directed energy, and I am being tortured from an unknown remote location by unknown assailants. And they will say, no, this is not happening. You are mentally ill. Give your medicine a chance to work. They say that to everyone all the time. And most who they speak to are targeted by directed energy weapons. They're not mentally ill at all. I was in a psychiatric hospital. All of the patients were sane. They were saner than the psychiatrists, as far as I could see, because the psychiatrists were under neuro weapon influencing, remote influencing. And the psychiatrists and the patients were saying, we're totally sane, but we're being targeted by a directed energy. And the psychiatrists were saying, no, you're not. Keep taking your medication. And the patients were right and the psychiatrists were wrong. Like, if Professor James Giordano comes forward and says, we have all of these capabilities. We can control anyone's brain from a distance. And then we say, well, our brains are being interfered with from a distance. And the police will refuse to believe us, even though those three high-profile neuroscientists have already verified that they're doing it. They're doing it. They're telling us we can interfere with brains from a distance. We can send data to the brains of society from a distance. We can harvest data from their brains. And yet we tell the police it's happening to us and they refuse to believe us. Well, I'll tell you something. I can't go to the police now because they have made it unsafe for me to ever return to them. Because if I go to them now, they'll send me straight to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist, if I persisted on telling the truth of what's happening to me, the psychiatrist would definitely incarcerate me inside a psychiatric hospital and force me to ingest very, very poisonous substances that make me shake all over, because they give me tardive dyskinesia, which makes you shake all over. Your hands shake, your feet shake, your whole body shakes. And then they give you something else called tardive dyskinesia, which is, it sounds like tardive dyskinesia. Sorry. Tardive dyskinesia is when you shake all over. Tardive akathisia, it's a different illness. You pace up and down the hospital corridor. You can't relax. So if I went to a psychiatrist, he would definitely say, you must stay in a psychiatric hospital for observation. Then they would give me this, they would mandate that I ingest these substances, which have such extreme side effects, it's akin to being tortured from the inside out. So it's unsafe for me to ever go back to the police. What the police need to do now, because they're in the wrong, for refusing to validate my statement. What they need to do is to write me a letter apologizing for not validating my statement and telling me that I can go in to see them at any time I like, and that I am safeguarded from psychiatry when I go in. And as well as that I can bring in all the other targeted individuals of directed energies with me when I go in, so that we can solve this problem once and for all. Because I know lots of them throughout Ireland, lots of them. And they're all suffering, and they're being tortured inside their own homes by means of directed energy. And those who are torturing them are working from unknown remote locations, while remaining anonymous cowards. And that has to be done, because we have a major problem in Ireland where Irish men and women are being tortured inside their own homes by means of energy weapons, and the police are refusing to validate our statements. A major problem, and it needs to be resolved, but we can't go in, because if we go in, we're automatically sent for psychiatric evaluation by heavily mind-controlled police, and then the heavily mind-controlled psychiatrists are heavily mind-controlled to send us, to incarcerate us inside psychiatric hospitals where we lose all our freedom. So this is a major problem in Ireland, and the only way we can solve it is by good communication. And I am communicating effectively now. I am telling exactly what the problem is. Please resolve it. Please resolve it. Please resolve it. Lots of people throughout Ireland are being targeted with directed energy inside their own homes and tortured. Some of them are getting electric shocks. Some of them are getting burnt. The blisters are coming up in their skin from directed energy attacks. And some of them are hearing voices which are being transmitted by technology, by directed energy into their brains. And some of them are experiencing forced muscle movement. And if you ask Professor James Giordano, can he do all that? He'll say, yes, I can. I can do all that and a whole lot more, and I'm doing it. And we're all doing it here in the American military, he'll probably tell you. And he's happy to say he's doing it. And yet, when we say it's being done to us, we're not being believed. And as well as that, the police themselves are being targeted by these by directed energy, and there are messages being transmitted, subliminal messages being transmitted into their brains, and the only ones they are prepared to believe are those at the top of the worldwide false hierarchy. And they don't believe their own fellow men and women at all who are being tortured inside their own homes. They're just only willing to believe we're mentally ill, which we are not. We are totally sane. Like the medicine, the substances which you are given when you go into a psychiatric hospital poison your blood. They poison your blood to such an extent you have no energy, because this happened to me. I already went through the system years ago when I first became targeted with directed energy. They gave me such poisonous substances. They had extreme side effects. They poisoned my blood. And I had no energy, and I wasn't able to think clearly, and I wasn't even able to speak clearly then, because my blood was so poisoned with those drugs they give you in psychiatric hospitals. My blood was heavily poisoned. I felt sick, poisoned. It took me months for all the poison to go out of my blood stream when I stopped taking them. So a voice was heard by me to say the following this morning: don't let that type of material out to the public, because they know in advance, because they can read my thoughts based on translating my unique EEG patterns at the speed of light or at the speed of real time. And they know my thoughts then, because they're translated onto their computer screens, and they know what I'm planning to do, and they know what I'm planning to say when I'm making a video. So, further to that, I heard on a radio program about neuroscience that European Union politicians already have their brains incorporated into a central control system so that they all think alike. And if that's the case, they're not acting on our behalf. They're acting on the will of those who control the brain, the central brain control system. There's a central brain control system in the world, and whoever controls that controls the brains of senior politicians throughout the world, and controls the brains of senior police officers throughout the world, and senior military men throughout the world. And they're all thinking in a hive mind, and they're no longer able to think clearly, because those who can still think clearly, who don't watch television and who don't use smartphones and who are outside the cities, away from the infrastructure that causes people to think in a hive mind, are able to think clearly, and they can see that our senior politicians and our senior police officers and others are not able to think clearly because they have dealt all wrong with the hoaxed pandemic. So anyway, another thing I want to talk about with regard to neuroscience. What they do is they transmit data into your brain containing images, upsetting images such as religious icons in a sexual pose. They translate an image of a religious icon, they transmit an image of a religious icon in a sexual pose into your mind. But they can transmit any type of image into your mind. They can transmit an image of yourself naked. And then what they do is they have another team of staff completely separate from the original team of staff. One team of staff are paid to transmit images into your mind, all kinds of images, upsetting images or upsetting pornographic images. And then they have another team of people totally separated from the first team with no communication between them, paid to observe your mind and see what images are generated by your mind. Because when you visualize something, they can translate the unique EEG patterns into the visual image on their own computer that you visualized. So if you have a separate team of neuroscientists, Team A, transmitting pornographic images into your mind, and then you have another Team B, paid to analyze the images that you generate from your mind, not knowing that Team A has just put them into your mind. Team B will think, well, this lady really has the most absurd images being generated by her mind. She must be really weird. And it wouldn't be me at all. It would be Team A sending them into my mind so that Team B could wrongly interpret them as coming from me, and they wouldn't be coming from me at all. To be coming from Team A. And that's what they're doing now. That is what they're doing. They employ a team to send really pornographic images into your mind. They employ another team to interpret the images as if you generated them, so that the Team B could then say, there's something wrong with this lady. She's generating all kinds of pornographic images. And it wouldn't be me at all, because they would be coming from Team A. So I just want to know that. I just want you to know that, because it's very worrying what they can do nowadays. They can do all kinds of tricks. And like, it's difficult. It's very difficult to talk about a new type of science that has never been discussed, and that's not being discussed on the mainstream media. It's not being discussed on the mainstream media because the mainstream media is now owned and controlled by those at the top of the hierarchy who are Luciferian, ultra-Zionist, human sacrificing criminals. And they own the mainstream media. So they spend their time creating a false reality for the public by means of the mainstream media, by means of Hollywood, by means of publishing houses, and by means of newspapers and magazines, and by means of songs. They create a false reality by all those means, and by means of some organized religions. They create a false reality for the public by means of mind control, by means of neuroscience as well, by means of mind control. So they create a totally false reality for the public by all those means, and then they reinforce it by the use of mind control technology. And the only place that you will find the truth now is on the internet, but not every internet, because some video platforms are heavily censored, such as YouTube. So you won't find the truth on YouTube, but you'll find it in lots of other video platforms and other places throughout the internet. Thanks for listening to me.